Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will DuPree, coming to you from the KXAN Live studio in Austin, Texas. A live image now outside in Austin where it is a warm, sunny day here, but we have another topic to talk about. Here in the U.S., the Trump-era policy known as Wait in Mexico is now back in effect. This week, the Biden administration reinstated the policy that applies to asylum seekers so that the U.S. government would now comply with a court order. This week as well, a new two-part series documenting the policy's implications on one family in particular went live this week over on BorderReport.com. In just a moment, we're going to show you the first part of the project called Life After Remain in Mexico. But first, let's bring in the reporter behind these stories. Sandra Sanchez is Nexstar's South Texas correspondent. She is joining me now live to continue this conversation about her reporting. Sandra, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate that and all the work that you've done. But first, I kind of want to set the foundation for our conversation. Let's first talk about this policy and what it does exactly.
Right. Remain in Mexico is formerly called the Migrant Protection Protocols program. It was started in July 2019 under the Trump administration, and it basically sends asylum seekers back over the border to Mexico to wait during their U.S. immigration court proceedings. U.S. immigration court proceedings can take upwards of 3 years to complete. Some of the migrants who were put in the program waited for over 2 years until the Biden administration halted the program. And I had the opportunity to meet this family in particular that I wrote about. They were one of the first families to be sent back over the border from South Texas, from Brownsville to Matamoros, Mexico.
And also for anyone who may be unfamiliar with how this policy got reinstated, you did mention there that the Biden administration, on I think it was his first day in office, rescinded this particular policy. How did it get put back into place?
Right. There's a lawsuit between the states of Texas and Missouri that was filed in April asking that the policy be reinstated. Both states said that the MPP policy helped to prevent asylum seekers who did not have legal recourse. They didn't have the proper reasons to ask for asylum to come across, and they wanted the policy to be in effect. At the end of August, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to block a federal injunction, a federal court ruling that said that the policy should be re-implemented. And so because the court failed to block it, the Biden administration was told that it needed to reboot the policy. That has taken several months, though, because they had to negotiate over several issues with Mexico.
In your new series that just came out this week, you profiled some of the people that were impacted initially when this policy went into effect back in 2019. Tell us a little bit about who you focused your story on for this first part of the series.
I met this family from southern Honduras, right near the border of El Salvador. Carolina Carranza Silva and her common-law husband, Jose Escobar, they had a 2-year-old daughter, Emily. She is now 4. I came upon them in the Matamoros camp 10 days into their stay there. They were living on a concrete slab of concrete, that they had nothing. And she just came up to me as I was filming and said, "No tenemos nada, we don't have anything and we need some help." And she just was very blunt in her story. And I just kind of got to know them, and every time I went across the border, I checked in on them. They eventually got a tent. It took them about 2 weeks of literally sleeping on the concrete with nothing else. They befriended some other Honduran families. They watched out for one another, but they really went through a lot of tribulations when they were put back across the border.
We do want to show everybody who's watching at home this very first part of the series that Sandra put together. So we'll show you that, and then we'll continue our conversation after this.
Carolina Carranza Silva was a hairdresser in Honduras. She was also a political activist, and in 2017, she backed a political candidate opposing their president. She says those who spoke out against their government became targets.
Hay muchas cosas por las cuales salimos.
If they got arrested, they would just disappear.
Había pena de cárcel para los protestantes. They will throw you in jail if you protest.
That's why she and her family fled to the United States. Their goal was to enter South Texas, about 1,700 miles away from their hometown of Choluteca, Honduras. But Carolina tells me their journey did not go as they planned. There's no way to verify the next events they described.
They got kidnapped twice in Mexico. In Mexico.
They say at a gas station they asked someone for a ride, but instead were kidnapped and held for ransom. They were held for 7 days in a house near San Fernando in the northern Mexican state of Tamaulipas. Relatives back home had to send ransom money, according to Carolina. Then another turn of events. Carolina and her family were taken from those kidnappers by a drug cartel. They were driven north to the border and again held for days. Eventually, they say a coyote or smuggler took them across the Rio Grande, and they boarded a raft on August 6th. Overcoming all of that, they finally entered the U.S. near the town of Hidalgo, Texas, and turned themselves into U.S. Border Patrol agents. But just a few days later, the United States government sent them back to Mexico under President Trump's Migrant Protection Protocols program. MPP began in 2019 and returned migrants to Mexico while they waited for U.S. court proceedings. The Department of Homeland Security said MPP helped restore a safe and orderly immigration process, reducing the incentive to attempt illegal entry, and ensured those who merit protection received the protection they need in a timely manner. More than 70,000 migrants like Carolina's family waited in Mexico because of MPP, according to Syracuse University's research group TRACK, which tracks immigration cases. With nowhere else to go, the migrants camped in squalid border towns like Matamoros, just across the border from Brownsville, Texas. Migrant advocates say the MPP policy strips migrants of their dignity.
Any laws, any policies that contribute to human suffering is not a good policy. It must need to be revisited and reconsidered.
Sister Norma is described as the Pope's favorite nun. She runs the largest migrant center in South Texas.
My experience from MPP, all I saw is a lot of human suffering in the other side of the border.
Nos pueden dar una oportunidad para poder trabajar.
I first met Carolina in August of 2019 in Matamoros. She and her common-law husband Jose and 2-year-old daughter Emily were living on a concrete slab.
Mire, yo no qué educación yo le voy a dar a mi hija si no tenemos nada.
They had little food and just 7 diapers for Emily to last 2 weeks. Children played together on the streets. They washed their clothes and bathed in the river. Emily developed a rash from that. Adults got 1 bottle of water a day, which they shared with their children. Their safety, always in jeopardy. Volunteer groups went to Matamoros every day, taking hygiene items, food, tents, clothing, and shoes to the migrants. Carolina told me she believed the volunteers kept them and thousands of others alive. By November, the temperature soon went from over 100 degrees to below 40. Carolina layered all the clothes she had. Emily cried at night under the blue tent they eventually got, complaining of pains in her legs as they lay on a thin sleeping bag. It was 2 days before Thanksgiving. They'd lived in the camp for 106 days. And Carolina was pregnant. Just when her family thought they could take no more, an immigration judge granted the family humanitarian parole. That's when the Department of Homeland Security allows someone into the U.S. temporarily due to an emergency or condition while their immigration process plays out. Because of her pregnancy, Carolina's family was allowed to legally cross the Rio Grande into the United States. Empty-handed, they walked to the Brownsville bus station. Volunteers greeted them with hugs and backpacks filled with clothes and food. The family took a bus to join relatives in Houston to begin a new life, stepping out of the trauma and the psychological horrors of the camp. Now they face new fears, whether the family could be deported when they finally have their day in immigration court in February. That's next time. In Brownsville, Texas, for BorderReport.com, I'm Sandra Sanchez.
Back here now in the KXAN live studio with Sandra Sanchez, who put together that very well done, thorough story. Sandra, I just want to let people know, too, that there is a second part to this that is up right now on borderreport.com. How else do you track this family's journey?
Right, and also I need to tell viewers my thanks to KXAN, which produced the video segment. Your staff, your news director, actually, it's a collaborative effort, and so thank you very much. The family has a follow-up hearing in immigration court in Houston in February, and so I plan to go. I have been in constant communication with them. I've been sharing the stories with them also. But you will see in tonight's part two, their trepidation and what they face now. Life in America is not what they expected. You know, it was bad enough being kidnapped twice, living on the streets, you know, developing ration sicknesses, but they came across and they really had no help, no assistance, and they have been struggling.
Sandra, do we know what the groups are doing there along the border now that this policy is back in place? Is the same kind of assistance that we saw back in 2019 continuing to this day?
Several NGOs, non-governmental organizations, nonprofits have been mobilizing. Nobody really knows how MPP reboot is going to look. As you know, it started this week. They started sending back migrants from El Paso to Juarez, which is West Texas, and they sent them right across the border. But I spoke with Sister Norma Pimentel, Executive Director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, and she runs the largest migrant center here. She has been in communication with U.S. officials in the White House, DHS officials, as well as Mexican officials. And she's really pushing that the migrants be put in safer shelters. And that might mean sending them to the interior of Mexico, cities like Monterrey, which is about 2.5 hours from here. How they would be transported there and returned to their court hearings is still yet to be seen, and that might be one of the reasons why we have not seen MPP re-implemented here in South Texas yet. But organizations like Team Brownsville, Sidewalk School for Children Asylum Seekers, the Global Response Management, Doctors Without Borders, you know, they've all been meeting regularly and preparing and trying to get donations and goods. And, you know, the border is overwhelmed. The shelters along the border do not have space for additional migrants.
Do we know yet, since this policy has only been re-implemented this week, if any migrants have been sent back to Mexico to wait it out for their immigration proceedings with this policy?
Yes, in Juarez, from El Paso to Juarez, if you have, the way DHS has explained it, they're going to turn them back at 7 ports of entry: San Diego, Calexico, California, Nogales, Arizona, El Paso, Laredo, Texas, and Brownsville. And they are going to have immigration tent court facilities in California at San Diego, El Paso, Laredo, and here in Brownsville. So they have started rebuilding 2 of the tent facilities here. One was actually still up, it just wasn't utilized fully in Brownsville, and they rebuilt another facility in Laredo.
Well, Sandra Sanchez, thank you yet again for all the reporting you've done and for everything that is to come, because I know there is so much more left to report about this very issue, but we appreciate all the work you've done and everything that is up right now on borderreport.com. Just let everybody who's watching at home know where they can find your stories in this 2-part series now.
Thank you. If you go to borderreport.com, you will see it. We appreciate you all following us every day. My colleagues and I are dedicated to covering the border, and we're grateful to Nexstar to be able to do that.
That is Sandra Sanchez. She is with borderreport.com as a correspondent here in South Texas for Nexstar. Sandra, thank you again. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, and if you'd like to read more about her reporting as she just detailed, it's available on borderreport.com. I'm Will DuPree, coming to you from the KXAN live studio in Austin, Texas. We'll see you here another time. Please, everyone, stay safe and healthy out there. Take care.